at the top to D, which is still pretty bad, but then this is the real negative. Yale and I-10 eastbound feeder doesn't improve at all. FD to FD, even with the mitigation. In other words, the mitigations are completely inadequate for the Yale and I-10 eastbound feeder road intersection. They don't solve the problem. And here, this is the ultimate comparison that puts it all together, all the levels of service. Look at that Yale and I-10. Starts as an F, continues to be an F after the project, even an F after mitigation. And what does the city design manual say? That the developer doesn't have to mitigate or do anything. Because if it starts as an F, is an F after the project, and is an F even after the recommended mitigation, then no mitigation is required. In other words, you can't mitigate. If it's already an F, it can stay an F, and the city is fine with it according to their design manual, and the developer is not required to put up any money to mitigate back to an E or any other lower level of service. Okay, we're going to change gears here for a little bit. We're going to move on to the February TIA. Started off with this document because this is what the city sent Kimley Horn, the developers, consultant engineers, telling them that what they wanted changed with the TIA. Now, this is a pretty standard process. This happens like 5 or 6 times, for instance, in the Ashby high-rise situation. But I want to focus on, for the purposes of this presentation, number 1 there, and that's about the city developing its own projections for the freeway interchange that differ from TxDOT's projections. Now, one of the big things about this project, which has made it unique and made this traffic impact analysis hard for the engineers, is predicting what the traffic will be on the new feeder roads. There aren't any hard counts, and so the engineers are left to their own devices. Excuse me. To come up with what the traffic's going to be like. Well, Kimley Horn, in their December TIA, used what are called the TxDOT design hour volumes. And we're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to do a comparison between TxDOT's numbers in the final TIA and the December TIA. So we're going to kind of see how the levels of service at each of the signalized intersections differed. Now, if you'll see, I've labeled these. If it's in red, it means that the level of service decreased, or that it got worse in the final TIA's TxDOT numbers versus the December TIA's. If it's in blue, it means that the level of service actually increased or got worse. So I want to clarify that. What I'm meaning by decrease is that the level of service got better. By increase, I mean the level of service got worse. So you see some of the things that the city had them do tweaked it a little bit. For instance, you'll see there number 4, the city takes out the installation of a traffic light, which the December TIA assumed was there, and there's some other little things about distribution. If you want, you can pause it and read through those, but for our purpose, I just want to demonstrate here that generally things got better, but they also got worse after they sent in their final TIA after those city comments. Now, this is what I want to really focus on, because in the comments, the city wanted them to run the city's numbers instead of TxDOT's numbers. And so in the final TIA, Kimley Horn ran both numbers. And I want you to look at these striking differences. On the left is the final grades for the signalized intersections using TxDOT's numbers. That's build conditions with mitigation. And on the right is the city's numbers. Everything in red means the LOS got better. And I want you to focus on this. On the left, you see the first intersection listed, Yale at Interstate 10 westbound feeder. that was rated E and D, pretty bad, using TxDOT's numbers. With the city numbers, it goes up dramatically to CC. Again, focus on the next one, the incredibly important intersection of Yale and I-10 eastbound feeder. It goes from FD grades, terrible traffic, to CC. And then if you'll look down, if you'll look down the rest of the way, you'll see that several other intersections improved. And so there's no doubt that the numbers that the city used were much less conservative than TxDOT's. And one wonders which ones are correct. Well, you may have guessed that the city thinks that their numbers are correct. Take a look at this. These are the mitigations recommended from the final TIA as opposed to the December TIA. Well, they're the same except one's missing. You'll see that in the final TIA, the February TIA, A is completely missing. Kimley Horn is no longer recommending as a mitigation that a dedicated right turn lane be installed at the intersection of I-10 westbound feeder and Yale. You see where I've crossed out where A was. And why did they do that? Well, read that last paragraph on that slide there. They did it because they used the city numbers, which were sugarcoating the data, if you will, compared to the December TIA. Look at there. They say, using the city data, that further mitigation on Yale Street beyond the widening described above is not necessary. So all of a sudden, one of the important mitigation measures that they said had to be done or needed to be done to make the project feasible no longer needs to be done. And that's not surprising, to me at least, because that mitigation happens to not have been reimbursable or wasn't part of the reimbursable costs in the 380 agreement. In other words, Ainbender would have had to pay for this mitigation if the TIA recommended that the mitigation take place. Now that it's not recommended, the developer no longer has to incur this additional cost, and the city probably, in that case, wouldn't have to go to the city council to go above the $6.05 million limit, the Clutterbuck Amendment, which we talked about earlier. Now, I want to spend just a little bit more time talking about the city numbers versus TxDOT. We wrote TxDOT a letter on February 23rd, not too many days ago, where we outlined a series of problems that we had with the TIA, the Bass Street connection, the city numbers versus TxDOT numbers. Now I want to show you the difference. On the left you see the TxDOT design hour volume numbers, and on the right you see the city's projections. This is taken from the final TIA, the February TIA, and I won't spend too much time going through this. If you want to pause it and read it, this more or less explains the difference between what the city was doing and what TxDOT was doing, and an explanation of how Kimley Horn took the city's models, projections, and did some calculating to arrive at their final numbers. And I wanted to throw this in here too, because this is an explanation from the December TIA about how they came up with their projected traffic for the new feeder roads using the TxDOT numbers. So again, if you're a traffic engineer, have any interest in helping me at least try to figure out what's going on here, please pause it and read it and contact me, because it's slightly confusing for me. I want to point this out. The city early on, this was back in fall 2009, put out a bunch of answers to a bunch of questions that citizens were asking. And very early on, the city seemed to be preparing to poo-poo TxDOT's numbers, which they felt made the traffic, unfeasible, I guess. And so they were very early on recognizing they may need a way around that. So they answered this question early on, even calling the TxDOT's projections questionable. I want to end up talking about the Bass Street connection. I like this view. You see Bass Street up there, and